hot outside today. Hi, everybody. I'm taking another look at the first edition of Bismarck, published by Avalon Hill way back in 1962. Why this game now? Well, if you know me, you know I'm a big fan of old school war games. I like to see how games in general develop and evolve over time. Today, Bismarck is not expensive on the secondary market, and it's not hard to find either, so why not? I argue it's a good title, but then again, I do love all the early Avalon Hill games. First generation Avalon Hill tabletop war games are like early arcade cabinet video games in my mind, meaning they have a memorable charm that is hard to describe beyond obvious qualities such as ease of play and fast pace. Bismarck specifically is wildly asymmetrical and yet still very cleverly balanced, easy, and a lot of fun. Even if the game is not a detailed simulation, it is at least very suspenseful. I've seen games decided on a final die roll, like if the Bismarck can disengage on a 1 to 2, 1d6 die roll result, it will escape back to a port on the next turn to win the game. If not, it's doomed and it will be forced to fight a losing battle. Stuff like that. But before I go any further, I should mention that I think the game has a minor potential to trigger some casual gamers, just because it is a conflict game, obviously, and you could make the argument that it's really guilty of glossing over the tragic elements of the historical narrative. It even comes with some poorly written historical notes and commentary. But I say, so what? It's an old introductory war game. The question is, can it still be enjoyed today? And as far as I'm concerned, the answer is yes. The rules are clear, just 4 pages. They can be summarized in 2 pages with a customized layout. Ideally, it's a 2-player double-blind contest, although one person can simulate a 2-player game if you use die rolls to determine the direction of ship movements in key moments. One side controls the German Bismarck, and the other side has the British Royal Navy. Here's how it works. It's simple, really. Accumulate the most points before the game ends. This happens as soon as the Royal Navy sinks the Bismarck, or when the Bismarck enters a friendly port after May 25th, 1941. Or if the Bismarck scores more than 15 points while at sea, or when time runs out. And I've actually never seen that happen. The first 2 outcomes are the most common. So how are points scored? For the British, they score more points the sooner they can sink the Bismarck. If the ship eludes them for 5 days, they will score 0 points. The German side mainly scores whenever the Bismarck sinks something. How many points depends on specific values of enemy units. You'll notice the Hood isn't even worth the most points in the British fleet. The more modern King George V and the Prince of Wales are both worth more. Besides other capital ships, the Bismarck can also sink cruisers, aircraft carriers, and convoys. More abstractly, though, through chance rolls on a simple combat resolution table. Ships move around on a search board. This is what the starting deployment or arrangement looks like. Whenever I've played opposed, the German player doesn't even sit opposite the British player. They may sit in a different chair away from the table and just use a reference sheet to plot movement. These come with the game. These sheets also have time tracks and hit record tracks for the big ships. They are very useful. Anyway, that's the setup. Gameplay is equally straightforward. The Bismarck moves first. It starts in Bergen and can move 6 squares initially on a breakout action. Every subsequent turn movement is 2 squares. Diagonal movement is allowed. Then the British move. All but 2 of their ships can move 2 squares a turn. The Rodney and the Ramillies only move 1 square a turn. There are no stacking limits. Next, the British player calls out any areas that he has ships in. Areas are divided into 4 zones. The German player must say if he is in the same area as any British ship. If no, that's a complete turn. Check a box on the turn track and then repeat the search board process. The British player then has an opportunity to make a 1d6 roll on the search chance table on any daytime turn that he fails to locate the Bismarck. If the British player declines to roll on the table, the German player may roll on it. So it looks like this. The most probable outcome is that a search plane locates the Bismarck anyway. However, there is also a 1 in 6 chance the Bismarck locates and sinks a merchant ship. Also, nothing of note may happen. If the Bismarck is in the same area as a British ship, there is a card play mechanism that nobody uses, whereby the British player hands zone-specific cards to the player of Germany minus any zone card within an area where a British ship is, A through D. So you could just call out the zones, forget the cards. I think the cards were meant to facilitate a better sense of deception or something like that. The British player might do something sneaky, like not reveal all of his ships in an area to maybe better confuse the German player. But I still say the cards are redundant and they're junk quality anyway, so I don't use them. If a cruiser or an aircraft carrier is in the same zone as the Bismarck, it's considered sighted and you mark off a time box and continue on to the next turn on the search board. It is only when a British battleship is in the exact same zone as the Bismarck does the tactical combat take place. This is where the dice start flying. I think the game only comes with one die. It's not enough. Always make sure you have a mitt full of d6s ready before you play Bismarck. You drop the Bismarck in the middle of the battle board, place the British ships on the edges. Either side gets to move one space before firing. 2 space distance between ships is considered long range. Under 2 is considered short range. You always have to fight at least one round of combat at long range. The ranges have distinct CRTs, short range being much more destructive. Secondary guns may also fire at short range, provided it's a broadside. Ship facings also matter. If you want to open or close range, it means your ship can only use stern or forward main gun factors for at least one round of combat. There is a different CRT for non-broadside damage allocation. You only need to rely on common sense to resolve ship facings. Roll 1d6 per each gun factor, consult the CRT, record hits on the ship hit record track, and after all hits are marked off, record one round of combat. After each round of combat, each side can roll on the battle board chance table. They must roll on the chance table if they want to disengage. It's the only way to break off combat early before one side sinks. As you can see, however, other things may happen. The Bismarck may sink a cruiser if one is in the same zone as the battleship. An aircraft carrier within 4 squares might get off an airstrike, etc. The obvious takeaway is that the British player has an advantage on the battle board chance table. After 3 rounds of combat, ships on the search board not involved in the battle may move a single square. After 6 rounds of combat, a time box gets marked off. Another important rule is that on night turns, British gun factors are reduced by 50%, rounded up. Gun damage on guns already destroyed carries over to flotation or midship boxes. And it's not much more complicated than that. There are a few other minor combat rules that deal with special cases like the Rodney's bizarre turret configuration and stuff like that. But in the end, it's also intuitive, seamless, and enjoyable. With this video, I don't want to actually get into too much discussion about strategy and gameplay tips. I will save that for my next video, where I will do a brief turn summary session report of a simulated 2-player game with a few extras and mods. Ultimately, there are a few factors that make German play harder than you might think, and the exact same thing might be said for the British side. But suffice it to say, this game is a classic. It's so accessible to new players especially, and despite the simple game mechanics, there's a lot of room for cat and mouse style trickery, move, counter move on the search board, lots of tension. Every throw of the dice is meaningful on the battle board. The whole range and facing guessing game is cool because experienced players aren't going to just bang away at each other with broadsides at long range. That can't be optimal gameplay in certain situations. And although rolling on the chance tables feels weird in a war game, it works. It's always thematic. You might say, okay, I buy it. The results make sense. Each game is ultimately going to play out a harrowing story, and all the while, both players will have a hard time predicting the outcome. Another thing I love about Bismarck is the fan support and mods and expansions and suggested rules adjustments that you can get. There are endless add-ons and scenarios you can explore. I plan to review one of these scenario packs in the future. The game got a second edition that piled on 3 more levels of detail and realism, so that's another path you can go down if you are a true fan of the original. Nowadays, I still recommend it. The old copies with faded counters, search board, warpage, and all will always have a spot on my wargame shelf. So pick this one up for cheap at a yard sale or something if you want a fine introductory level war game. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for more content coming soon.